So this is the Vestax VCM 600 USB MIDI controller. The footprint of it is a 19-inch tabletop, and it doesn't look like we're ever going to be able to rack mount it. In theory, the rack mount ears would actually have to go over the actual body of the unit. So we'll see if Vestax bring out a product to do that, but I think we're going to be pretty much limited to tabletop standalone usage. I've already found out that these lights down either side of here look pretty cool, but are pretty much useless in any dark situation. They're just not going to be bright enough for anything, so we're still limited to lights or having to supply some other way of actually seeing things. The unit itself is broken into two sections. You have the left-hand section here, which is essentially a 6-channel DJ mixer with 6 identical channel strips on it. Each one has a fader, stop, play, pile of commands here. Obviously they're all pre-marked in here, but as you'll see as I go through it all, some of them I'm going to use, a lot of them I'm going to ignore. I haven't used a mid controller on a DJ mixer for a long time, for example, and I don't use a pan for anything, so they're going to get reassigned to everything else. Bear in mind it is just a MIDI controller, so while these have got all names on them, you can actually, inside Ableton, inside whatever software you want to use, assign them to whatever you want, provided it's got learn functionality. What I'm actually looking at doing long term with one of these units is taking this faceplate off, getting another copy, blank copy made, putting it on there, naming it myself and re-etching it so it's actually a bit more customized to what I'm going to use. So each one of these channels, the sliders on it are, as I understand, the same sliders that are in the Vestax actual DJ mixers. They certainly don't feel at all plasticky, they feel like a proper fader. Each of the lights in here will respond to a MIDI control signal that is sent out of your system, so you can either use it to just indicate the function of whatever the switches are, or you could in theory actually set something up in the computer to feed information through those lights. Haven't done that yet, but might look at doing something in the future with that. So to give you an idea, the way I've got this set up at the moment is your fader is obviously a fader, stop and play on your scenes inside Ableton, headphone cue, view the clip that's playing, view the track it's playing in. I'm using these as a filter and resonance. Your sends, I'm using as sends. I'm using this as an effect parameter with turning the two effects on or off. Bass EQ, high EQ, and this is just a gain pot. Interestingly enough, even though it's all digital, I still find having a gain to just adjust incoming signal is very, very useful. These buttons here I'm using as a kind of insert send effect. Essentially that's going to a glitch, that's going to a beat repeat, and that's going to a envelope controlled filter. So that's the same for each one of these channels here. What you've actually got 6 channels here. If we come up onto this other side here with the track bank button, we hit that and we've now got another 6 channels here. So if you should want to, you've essentially got 12 channels available to use. What I will probably be doing is setting this up as an audio side of mix, and this will actually end up as my instruments, so drum machines and synthesizers for the hybrid live show, where this will control the live side of things, which will feed into the audio side of things with some one-shot sounds and also some DJ tracks as a real kind of hybrid DJ live mashup thing. An interesting thing that works with these lights here, if I move one of these faders, we get a green light. If I flick over to the track bank here, move it again. Now, some of you will realise these are not motorised, so we now have the issue that my track 3 is out of sync with track 6, 7, 8, 9 here. So what we do, if we flick back, it now changes and we have a light basically indicating where our fader needs to go till we're in the right place. We go back here, we'll see we go down. And at that point, it will then take over and start controlling again. So it's not motorized, but it's a pretty cool system to make sure you don't get lost or have too many jumps between your volume controls on the 2 banks. So that's the DJ side of the mixer. If we now look at the master side of it, again, it has a lot of these tracks pre-assigned, or it's kind of got pans and cues and everything like that. I've chosen mainly to disregard all of that because it's just not the way that I work. Probably the quickest way is to give you an idea of how I've set it up, and then again you can kind of decide if that would work for you or you want to do something different. I'm actually using the two returns here. Instead of them being volume controls, it's a delay and a reverb, and I'm just using those as big feedback controls to control the feedback. That's essentially on and off. Time related parameters, so the delay time or the size or the reverb size, and then these are additional effects and controls to control those effects there. I haven't actually assigned the master volume control or slider yet. I haven't quite decided what to do with that. In this case I have a glitch, I have a tape stop, I have a bit crusher, something called Fade to Grey, which is a Ableton rack. The crossfader I just have set up as basically a reverse effect. The tempo slider over here, I actually am using that as my main volume control. The tempo knob I am using as a tempo inside Ableton and using the nudge. I've pretty much set this up so that when I am mixing into somebody else, I will still be able to nudge it back and forth and beat match into it, rather than having, like you sometimes have with a lot of DJ to live systems, is one bit of music that stops, the other one starts. I'll actually be able to mix into it. And at the moment I am using the loop in and out and on and off functionality in here. The scene control down here, I'm going to be using it for Ableton, so I am using it to simply scroll up and down in the Ableton scene, and also if you hit it, then that will, in this case mine's assigned to play all of that row of clips. Things that I'm looking to doing or would like to do, I'd like to set all these up as individual loop controls for the track. Ableton works a little bit differently than say a lot of DJ controllers, in that it's almost the loop on-off settings are kind of universal, where you're only really meant to manipulate one at a time. I like to have them all separately, so I'm probably going to use something like Bohm's MIDI translator to actually set a series of commands every time you hit that button or control that knob, so that I can hit that and it will actually change the loop on track 5 and so on like that. Over the back we have a input for a foot controller, which is converting that to MIDI, so you could again use that to trigger off samples or whatever you could really think of. There's a ground point on the back, I guess if you're getting a ground loop through the system, but I'm not quite sure what you'd use that for really. You can use a power supply into this. If you find your laptop is not supplying enough USB power, it runs off that USB bus otherwise, which is very, very cool. It means you don't have to carry a wall wart around with you. Otherwise you can plug that in to kind of supplement the power supply going in there. Obviously a USB plug, and you've also got a switch there to basically decide with your faders whether it is working the system here where it waits to you on the appropriate point, or it just jumps straight away to whatever the new value is. So that's a brief overview of the different sections of the VCM. What I'm going to do now is essentially go through and play on it for a bit and show you just the effects that I've got set up into it and how I'm looking at using it. Obviously each and every user will hopefully set it up in their own way and to their own tastes. Don't worry too much, I guess, about the mix itself. It's really just to give you an idea of some of the functionality and to hopefully give you some ideas of how you might use VCM 600 in your